Well, as you're beginning to prepare for your trip to the Middle East, we want to give you a bit of an introduction to Islam. Islam is the most prominent religion in the Middle East, and so let's give you a bit of an overview. First of all, Islam comes from a small Semitic word, salam, which means peace, but it can also mean submission. And so to Muslims in Islam, Islam is the philosophy which leads to peace through an understanding of Allah. It is one of the most remarkable stories in human history, the Islamic history. The contributions, first of all, that Islam has made to art, literature, and science is well known throughout the whole world. It started as just a small band of Muslims around their leader Muhammad in the 7th century AD, and today it is over 1.5 billion Muslims throughout the world, throughout Middle East, Africa, and Asia predominantly, but Muslims today are living throughout the whole world, so you're likely to encounter them wherever you're living. It's mostly associated with the Arab countries since the philosophy of Islam began in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century. On a trip to the Middle East, Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, you will encounter Muslims and Islamic philosophy, and you will see and hear Muslims practicing their faith every day. Those who adhere to this philosophy in the Middle East, Arabs, Egyptians, Turks, among others, are wonderful people, each with their own remarkable story. And so we want to help you connect to them in a special way by understanding that main philosophy which they adhere. So let's take just a few moments to get acquainted with Islam. Its early beginnings. Most people know that Islam began with a man named Muhammad, who was the founder of the movement. And Muhammad was born in the 6th century, 570 AD, in Mecca, which is in western Arabian Peninsula, a place called the Hijaz. He was a member of the ruling Arabian tribe there, the Quraysh family of the Hashim tribe. Now, before Muhammad, the whole of the Arabian Peninsula and all the Arabian tribes were all polytheists. They believe in multiple gods. And Mecca itself had been a pilgrimage destination long before Muhammad, as people would go up there to worship their various gods worshipped in the desert. Now, Mecca was a religious pilgrimage site as well as a center for trade in Arabia. Arab people made annual pilgrimages to Mecca to visit what's known as the Kaaba, which is a cube or a big square-shaped box. And that is simply, Kaaba means cube. It was known as the Bait al-Haram, that is the sacred house. Or today, al-Bait Allah, the house of Allah. You've probably seen pictures of it before. So they would go there, whilst polytheists, to worship at the Kaaba. Today it's in the Masjid al-Haram, that is the sacred mosque in the center of Mecca. It is a very ancient structure. It's believed by Muslims to have been built by Abraham and Ishmael, so it goes way back in time. Nobody knows exactly when, but it's been rebuilt several times throughout history. Today it's made of stone, it has some golden doors, and it's usually covered in a decorated black shroud. And Muslims circle around that when they make a special trip there. Now, when Muhammad captured the city of Mecca in 629 AD, he cleared the Kaaba of its idols. And some historic accounts say that there were as many as 360 different idols that were worshipped there by the in the Arabian pantheon. Muhammad retained the structure, however, and he incorporated it into the practice of Islam, now to serve the purposes of Allah. How did it all begin, though? It began with a series of revelations. In 610 AD, when Muhammad was 40 years old, he began to receive a series of revelations from the angel Jibril, or Gabriel, first on the mountain known as Jabal al-Nur, that is the mountain of light outside of Mecca. And these revelations were given to him, led Muhammad to a firm belief in a single God, that is Allah. So Muhammad is the one to introduce monotheism to the Arabian Peninsula. At first, he sought acceptance from Jews and Christians because they also were monotheists, and he thought he had some sort of kinship there. But they did not embrace his philosophy. Yet initially, there was respect by Muhammad for Jews and Christians, and they were referred to by Muhammad as the people of the book. In other words, the people who follow the Bible. Later, however, because of their rejection of Muhammad, an animosity arose between them. And this is seen in some of the later statements in the Quran. It's a very interesting study. where there's both positive statements and negative statements sometimes made against Jews and Christians. Now, the Arabian people also did not immediately embrace his philosophy, as Muhammad was kicked out of Mecca, and he made a new home for himself in the small movement at the time, the fledgling movement, in the town of Yathrib, which was north of Mecca, and later called Medina, which simply means city. But by the time of Muhammad's death in 632 AD, nearly the entire Arabian Peninsula had converted to Islam through Muhammad's campaigns throughout the region. Now, according to Muslim history, the revelations from the angel continued to Muhammad until his death in 632 AD. These revelations were recorded on tablets of clay or stone, sometimes palm fronds, they were written out, or on bone, or sometimes they were just simply committed to memory by some of the members in the band. And 20 years after Muhammad's death, the verses were compiled into a book known as the Qur'an. Now, Qur'an means recitation. It's from a small Semitic word, qara, which means to read or to recite, and it is the centerpiece of Islamic devotion. What is in the Quran? Well, it's primarily a collection of philosophical or religious injunctions. It has almost no historic context. In that way, it is much different than the text of the Bible, which gives detailed historic accounts. However, it does contain laws and commandments and instructions on social and moral behavior, like some portions in the Bible. Now, Muslims believe that the Quran is God's final revelation to mankind and completes the Torah, or the Old Testament, as well as the New Testament, which Muslims refer to as the Injil. So they show a respect for the Old Testament and Torah, as well as the New Testament. Some Muslims study those. Now, Muslims consider Muhammad the last and the greatest of a succession of prophets, which includes Adam and Abraham and Moses and even Jesus. Now, to help us understand more the center of what Islam is all about and what it's built on, let's talk about what are known as the 5 pillars of Islam. These are 5 principles of faith and practice that define what it means to be a Muslim. And the first one is this: testimony. That is a testimony of faith. In Arabic, it's known as the Shahada. In Arabic, it sounds like this: La ilaha illa Allah, Muhammad Rasulallah, which means there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And that is recited by Muslims. As a matter of fact, in order to become a Muslim or to convert to Islam, it's necessary to say that confession of no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger or the prophet of Allah. It's really all that's required to be a Muslim. You must do that, so say it, and say it from your heart to confess that statement. The second pillar of Islamic faith is prayer, known as salah, or also sometimes seen as salat. And that's 5 daily prayers, every single day. And this is perhaps the most noticeable thing that you'll see when you're in the Middle East, and you'll hear it actually through the call to prayer. It is a devotion to prayer. You'll hear it 5 times a day, before sunup, very early in the morning. Very often what wakes us up in Middle East when we're there is the call to prayer, sometimes at 4:30 in the morning. It's before sunup, it's just afternoon, and then there's one in late afternoon, and then just after sundown, and then late at night before bed. And so those 5 times Muslims are obligated to pray, either go to the mosque and pray, or they can stay at home and pray as well. Usually ceremonial washings also performed prior to prayer. And so if you visit a mosque or if you visit a Muslim religious site, you will see places to wash, and they wash before they pray to show that they are being cleansed before they come before Allah. The third pillar is that of almsgiving. It's called zakat. And in ancient times, it was used as a type of tax to support the state. But now it's really considered charitable giving, and it's given to help the poor. And so that's a constant pillar that you'll see the Muslims will be collecting monies to give to the poor. The fourth one is fasting, known in Arabic as Sawm. It's done during the month of Ramadan. From sunup to sundown, they fast. Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed, and so from sunup to sundown, there's a complete fast of food, of drink, of other things, of smoking, or whatever else. And that is their dedication of fasting to Allah. Ramadan is the month in which they say that Muhammad received the revelations, or began to receive the revelations from Gabriel on the mountain. And the fifth and last pillar is that of pilgrimage, also known in Arabic as Hajj. A pilgrimage to Mecca, that is to go visit the Kaaba and to circle around it 7 times, is incumbent upon all Muslims who are able. At least once in their lifetime, they are called upon to go to the Mecca and to circle the Kaaba for the Hajj. So those 5 pillars, testimony, prayer, almsgiving, fasting, and pilgrimage, form the core of what it means to be a Muslim. Now, one more thing we want to look at just briefly, and that is dress and customs. Dress, everyone is curious about fashion, and in the Middle East, religious garb is a fascinating study because you've got not only Muslims, but you've got Jews, you've got Druze, and you've got all kinds of people all wearing all kinds of things. So it's really fascinating. The basic rule in Islam, when you see Islamic dress, is cover and be modest. Cover and be modest. And this is really important for you as well who will be traveling to the Middle East. You can wear your regular Western clothing, but you should plan to dress modestly and respectfully when you're in the Middle East. In other words, not scantily clad things like the little spaghetti dresses or that sort of thing. You should be covered. Women's dress for Muslims, the most common item for women is the hijab. Many of us have seen that. We see it here even in our own countries. It covers the head and neck and usually wraps around head and neck and leaves the face clear. That's called a hijab. And this is the most common feature of Muslim dress for women. There's another word that perhaps you've heard as well. It's called a burqa. And a burqa is a full garment from head all the way down to your feet. It's a full robe that covers to the toes and usually also covers the face. And sometimes there's a space for the eyes like this that's left open, or it too is covered with a mesh and a screen in very, very traditional societies among the Muslims. Now for men, it's very common to wear what's called a kufi, which is a type of skull cap that comes down, usually knitted and comes down around the head, kind of like the kippah if you've been to Israel. And so they commonly wear that, religious men, but then they also wear just loose-fitting clothing. You'll see them in modern dress, but usually always pants. It's usually not... Usually don't see Muslim men wearing shorts unless they're playing sports. They usually always have long pants on. And that, again, is just to follow the idea of being covered and being modest. Now, there are also some robes that some Muslim men wear, and you'll see that very often in Egypt, for example, or in Jordan. It's called a thob, and it's simply just a long, plain robe. You'll see them in white, particularly in Saudi Arabia, or blue, or tan, or brown, or sometimes black. And today you see also all this traditional dress in the Middle East, but you'll also see the introduction of very modern dress, and often a combination of modern with the traditional. For example, a lot of times you'll see women who are just dressed in beautiful Western outfit, maybe have pumps or high heels, but then they also have a hijab on, showing both the kind of the introduction of modern dress and Western dress with the traditional dress of the Muslims. So some other customs, just very, very briefly. Friday is the Muslim day of worship. This becomes very complicated in the Middle East because you've got the Muslims taking off on Friday, the Jews in Israel taking off on Saturday, and the Christians taking off on Sunday. So it's a big weekend. But the Muslim day of prayer and worship is Friday. They go to the mosque, you hear prayers, you hear preaching, you hear chantings very often from the imam, and that's the day of celebration. And then another interesting thing is halal. Maybe you've heard that before. That's the dietary code of Islam, similar to the laws of kashrut, that is the kosher dietary laws of the Jews. For example, like the Jews, the Muslims do not eat pork, they don't eat the carnivorous animals, but Muslims also do not drink alcohol as a rule. So I hope this brief overview of Islam will help you understand many of the people that you will encounter in the Middle East. We want you to make connections there, but also as we go as visitors to these countries, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, Turkey, we want you to understand and be respectful and to open up conversations with people too about what they believe, what they think. This will be a great opportunity for you as you're on your tour with GTI.